Let's see,
Yeah,
Deb.
that's right.
Debbie, bust that.
Okay. Okay, there she goes.
Most victims of a crime, either their lifestyle, who they hang around with, or where they hang around leads them to becoming maybe a victim. And for her, none of those applied.
Crawl time, Deb. Crawling. Turn it up.
The Debbie Dorian case was very unique, very different at that time. And it really was one of those whodunit type cases.
Understandably, Peter Dorian is having a difficult time dealing with the death of his 22-year-old daughter, Debbie. He was the one who discovered her body, bound and gagged. She had been sexually assaulted, murdered in her Northeast Fresno apartment.
There were a lot of rumors going around, who could have done it and stuff like that. And I don't think really anyone really knew.
And so when you have the cases like Debbie Dorian as a victim, those are the ones that can create somewhat of a shock wave in your community and a panic and a fear, especially when the suspect is not identified and is outstanding.
I always wondered when or are they ever going to solve that?
I was born in Fresno. We're a third-generation Californians, and I lived in the west side of Fresno on Cornelia and Clinton area. And so at college, I met Deb's dad, Peter, and we had Deb, of course, and she was a joy of our life. And from the minute she was born, she was just fun. This was the outfit that Deb wore when we were at the OCS graduation, the last time I saw her. So you can see that's how big she was. Isn't that sweet? Such a good sense of style, little girl. Wherever she was just happy and fun, and you had good times with her, and we just shared life, from the time she was little, and I used to go in every night and tuck her to sleep and all that sort of thing. And you just remember all those wonderful times and how she played in the pool and how she had a wonderful fashion sense. Some people are just fun. You never know what they're going to do, but it's always going to be fun. Yeah.
So in the 1990s, we were really embattled in terms of crime, violent crime, gangs within our community, people that were oftentimes afraid to come outside, to allow their children to play in the front yard because of the amount of gang violence that we had, drive-by shootings, carjackings, home invasion robberies. We were definitely a city that was plagued with crime in the mid-90s.
So I pretty much covered the worst crimes spanning 132 miles throughout the Central Valley. That meant that I met people many times on the worst moments of their life, when they were facing unimaginable circumstances and in a position that they never thought they would be in. They woke up one day and their life was perfect, and it will never be the same again.
You did not cover this crime when it happened. You were in college. You were in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
But you heard about this crime.
Everyone heard about it.
It's the tragic story of a young woman's life that ended too early. Family members and neighbors say Debbie Dorian, a Fresno State student, worked hard and had plans to specialize in audiology. Perry Sandino is Debbie's next-door neighbor. He tells us she lived alone in this upstairs apartment and had been looking for a roommate. According to police, Debbie's dad found her body in her bedroom early this morning after finding out she had not shown up for work in 2 days.
I was a lieutenant at that time, assigned as the administrative lieutenant and public information officer. And so when we first received that information that day, it was a shock, certainly to us. It was a case that we knew was going to garner a great deal of media attention, that was going to cause a lot of fear in our community. This was going to be a big case. This was going to be a challenge for our investigators, our homicide investigators. It was the worst nightmare for a father. I can't imagine a father having to go in and find his daughter tied up, gagged, and murdered. And that's what Peter Dorian found that day.
I don't think I want to say what it's like when it happened because it was so difficult. It was it's too hurtful to say that. Basically, I just went nuts, basically. And my sister and brother-in-law came over and drove me to Fresno and took care of me. And so from there we went down to the police station and that sort of thing. But yeah, so it was terrible, yeah.
Obviously, word travels fast. It was the talk of the town. My parents called me when I would come home to visit, as I did often. They would say, hey, you need to be very aware of what you're doing because there's a murder on the loose.
I think there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of panic, and there was a lot of concern by the neighbors in the area. And much of that driven by the type of crime that occurred, and also by the fact that the suspect was not known and was outstanding.
We'll just keep doing it until this is solved. I don't want this person or persons to get away with this. I won't rest until it's solved.
Well, I can remember all too well because I remember that was perhaps one of those days when I saw my police chief, Ed Winchester, very excited about a homicide detective telling him that they had a DNA match.
Of course, it made me angry because as soon as I could find somebody that had killed her, I was going to be in bear mode, you know.
The news of her murder sent shockwaves through the residents here. A number of them told us they're relieved an arrest has been made.
I think it's great. I mean, hopefully it's the right person.
An arrest was made in the death of Deborah Dorian. Last night at about 7 p.m., officers from the Attorney General's sexual predator assault team made an arrest at our request in this case. And under arrest is Maurice Lavelle Dixon.
Many neighbors say they saw Dixon get arrested on Monday night. At the time, they didn't know why. It happened right here in front of his house. When Dixon arrived home from work, undercover officers swooped in, and he was arrested with his hands up right in the middle of the street.
There was a lot of relief. There was relief on the part of the dad, the family, only to find out that later on, a short time later, that the DNA was a partial match and that we had the wrong suspect in custody.
Evidence recovered at the scene included semen. Before Dixon's arrest on October 28th, he submitted blood for a so-called DQ-alpha DNA test. It narrowed potential suspects to a group that covers 7 to 20% of the population. It was the second DNA test that cleared Dixon. The RFLP test is designed to pinpoint suspects at a rate of 1 in 3 million. The test showed no matchup for Dixon's DNA.
When he was arrested, it wasn't like I automatically thought he did it. I just thought, well, they know what they're doing. You know, maybe he did. I wasn't surprised he got let out, but I was disappointed, really disappointed. Yeah, so.
I can tell you that was one of the biggest letdowns I think I ever experienced in my career, and certainly it was for our police chief at the time, and I know it was for the family. It created some concerns on the part of the community, perhaps a loss of confidence that maybe our investigators didn't know what they were doing. And that's always a challenge in a police department, which is why when we make an arrest, we have to make sure we have the right suspect in custody. And in this case, we didn't.
Maurice Dixon had been in custody for a little more than 2 weeks. Tonight, he is free, and the investigation into the Debbie Dorian murder case returns to square one.
In early January of 2002, Action News reported on a sexual battery case that happened at a bus stop on Murray Avenue in Visalia. Police said a man wearing a hooded jacket took out a gun and told a woman he'd kill her if she ran. He then fondled her breasts and walked away.
We feel that possibly this is associated with another sexual battery that occurred earlier this year of a 16-year-old student on her way to school.
I can't even imagine what it was like for women who were hearing about this and thinking, is it safe to go outside? Is it safe to go to my car? Is it safe to go to work? Visalia police investigators later determined the earlier case was related. They also believe the cases were connected to 2 other sexual assaults in 1999.
This is a case that generated a good deal of attention during the time. Obviously, it struck fear in the heart of women who were walking in areas of Visalia.
They walk through the series of assaults starting in 1999, I think going through 2002, and just went one by one. The fact that with these victims, they had to wait so long for that person to be identified. You're talking 20 years or close to 20 years in all of these cases. I remember that they talked about the DNA sample coming from that first case, which is kind of incredible that they got it from the first case and none of the others. This was the first time in Tulare County that a John Doe complaint had been filed using DNA profiles. Even though they didn't have a suspect, they didn't have a name, they had the DNA, and that was enough to file charges. And it's kind of counterintuitive because how can you file charges against no one, just a DNA profile? After the press conference, I think it was in between stories. So I had a story at 5 and I had a story at 6, I think. And I think it was in between there that I get a message from a woman who mentioned the possible connection to the murder of Debbie Dorian, the Fresno State student. And I think I just brushed it aside. I was like, okay, I'll come back to that. I remember mentioning it to someone at the station and right away made that connection and thought, oh, okay, we got to look into that. That just took the story to another level. You know, you walk out of that press conference thinking it's already horrible enough, all these different victims, and then there's a murder.
Fresno police are expecting an arrest in a murder that shocked the Central Valley 23 years ago.
Nikki Dwayne Stain is the primary suspect in the rape and murder of Debbie Dorian.
Authorities say technology used in the Golden State Killer case linked Stain to the profile, a connection made from a DNA sample collected at the scene. And District Attorney Lisa Smitkamp says that evidence points directly to the suspect.
I would bet my left leg it's Nikki Stain.
There is a DNA database, and that DNA database allows for once there's been a DNA analysis, whether of evidence or of a suspect that's been arrested, that system is called CODIS. So what allowed us to connect the Fresno case to the Visalia case was the DNA entry into CODIS. We knew that the same person who victimized Debbie Dorian and killed her was the same one that victimized a victim in Visalia. When we made the arrest on Nikki Stain, it was 100% connection to DNA.
Well, then of course I had 100 questions. Well, where was he? How old is he? What's he doing? What's he like? What's his past been? And, you know, does he have family? What's, you know, all of those questions.
You would never guess by just seeing him. He doesn't look like what I thought he would look like. He pretty much looked like an average guy. And I remember thinking, wow, for all these years, he pretty much lived a normal life.
A lot of people do have in their mind what an attacker looks like, and most people probably wouldn't peg him.
You know, it's hard to get inside of the mind of a sexual predator, somebody that was that evil. But it was very apparent. He lived a double life. He got married and appeared to be normal, but the reality is he had this dark side.
If you look at Nikki Stain's social media presence, as we always do, Nikki Stain had 2 different Facebook accounts we found after he was arrested. One, Nick Stain, is a Facebook account that he seems to have used for family purposes, work purposes, keeping it, based on what we can see, fairly clean, appropriate, whereas you have this other Facebook account where he goes by the name Nick Steele, and Nick Steele seems to be almost an alter ego to his other account, and what we see there is a guy who is just looking to have a good time, and actually seems to be having a good time in a lot of cases.
The first time I saw him in the court hearing, I just looked at him and thought, you know, you don't belong here. You should be gone, and Deborah should be here. You don't have any right to live. What you did, you should be gone. Yeah.
Nikki Stain pleaded not guilty to 12 felony charges Thursday, but prosecutors believe they have more than enough evidence to convict him and get him sentenced to death. Prosecutors also charged him with sexually assaulting 3 other women and a case of peeping in Tulare County.
I'm Jane Bolger, and I represent Nick Stain. He had a private life, a private sexual life with, you know, consenting adults. That was part of him. But see, working was part of him. Cooking for everybody, he really enjoyed that. Apparently at all the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, such, he always cooked. You know, so it's interesting because he just comes across as like your neighbor. We have the disadvantage of the whole community being aware of one, you know, narrative, one story. You know, it was just, oh my gosh, look at this, it must be this, and then assumptions can become facts after 20 years. They put somebody on TV that as a DNA match that wasn't. They're so eager to, I believe, resolve the case that happened. You know, it's all about, I think, rushing and wanting an answer instead of really making sure the fact that was immediately determined that she was raped. There's no proof of that. There's no proof of forced sex. You have to show a lack of consent. Well, there's nobody to tell us that, obviously. It's a leap, and it was because of emotion that was determined. The autopsy reports don't lend themselves to some kind of vicious attack.
How did Nick meet Debbie Dorian if it was consensual?
Again, I'm not able to discuss that except to say they weren't strangers, and I'll have to leave it at that now.
she was not only a real person, but a loving, wonderful person who was taken out just as she was blooming. She was just getting into her prime. She missed a lot of important things in life. She missed her graduation, she missed her occupation, she missed her wedding, she missed Christmases, she missed everything from that day on. You can't get it back. Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah.
Technology advances, as DNA advances, it provides hope to families who have lost loved ones, because you never know what piece of evidence that was collected then and was analyzed, how that case may be revived, just like the Debbie Dorian case. And so families have hope. I've never known a family to have closure who lost a loved one in a violent crime. You can bring justice, but you can never bring closure.
Dead in the water, I circled the truth. Wouldn't believe myself.